Magdalena, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Hans, very much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, colleagues, depends from where you are joining us. I hope you still hear me okay. If not, please be informed. I don't see a chat, so if something is wrong, please shout. My name is Magdalena Jóźwicka-Olsen, and I'm a climate change mitigation expert at the European Environment Agency. I'm not only a little bit, but a lot excited to be here to have this webinar with you. I would like to thank the organizers for this opportunity. So what is on the agenda today? We will be talking about the EEA catalog of policy evaluations. I coordinated this cross-cutting initiative, and we will discuss here what we've learned from this project. So let me start. Does it work? Yes. So first, I will introduce you to the catalog. I will talk about the EEA motivation and approach. Then we will hear from Aurélie and Fabian from Rumble. They are experts on methodology and the meta-analysis from the gathered information. Next, I will show you the catalog, and I will finish with some reflection on next steps. And at the end, we will have a discussion and Q&A session. But first, I want to tell you a little bit about the European Environment Agency, EEA. It's an agency of the European Union, but we have 32 member countries and 6 cooperating countries. We are a bridge between science and policy. We gather and analyze information to provide it to the policymakers, but also to the public. We provide information that is sound and independent, the information that is reliable, relevant, targeted, and timely. We work very closely with our network and to deliver our work. The IONET stands for European Environment Information and Observation Network. So how do we work on policy evaluation? All thematic groups at the agency work with it, but they might have different ways of thinking, different focuses. In my area, climate change mitigation, we often start from the officially reported information on greenhouse gas policies and measures. There is a wealth of this information. We have materials for over 2,000 national policies. But here is the thing. We don't get much information on policy effects, especially on the achieved effects or on costs and benefits. This figure comes from one of our briefings, and it shows that only few countries report ex post policy effects, only 8% of policies in 2019. And that's a problem because we need this information to understand which policies work and which policies do not work. But still, with the available information, we look how reported information can support policy evaluation. And here the answer is yes, it can. You can read another briefing on that. The links to our briefings are provided at the end of the presentation. We also have some cross-cutting activities in the area of policy evaluation. And here is an example. We prepared an environment and climate policy evaluation guidance document with an updated model for policy evaluation that we used in our assessments. And another exciting example is the reason why we are here. It is the catalog of the European environment and climate policy evaluations. The exciting part of this work is its cross-cutting nature. That means we brought together all thematic groups. But how did we get the idea to work on it? The policy evaluation has been having an important role in policy cycle, and many organizations have done various policy evaluations or different assessments, and these evaluations were publicly available. But there wasn't any compilation. and a comprehensive resource for those interested in specific things. And specific things, for example, evaluation in certain thematic areas, evaluation of certain types of policies, certain methodologies used to carry out specific evaluations. Working together, we noticed something else. The coverage across different environmental and climate areas was very unbalanced. There is much more information on climate and energy, and not so much on other areas, for example, on water, health, or waste. So the question was, does missing evaluation indicate a lack of policy action? Taking that into account, we came up with an idea to collect the information and create a catalog of environment and climate policy evaluations. So how did we establish a catalog? We did it in few steps. The idea came in 2017, and because of this unequal interest, we wanted to make sure we cover all relevant policy domains. Then we did an internal exercise at home. We identified the list of elements to review each policy evaluation against. And then in 2018, we asked Trinomics to support us. We developed methodology, and as a result, we had an Excel database that was used in other projects, but unfortunately, we didn't publish it at that time. So in 2020, we asked Rumble to update catalog. It was very important for us at that time to publish an updated database. And this is what we achieved. And in the beginning of 2021, the EEA catalog was published on our website. So what is this catalog? Later, I will take you around, but first, some very general information. It is an open database on almost 600 reviewed policy evaluations. These evaluations are reviewed according to features we identified earlier. And for example, it's the basic information like policy area, sectors covered. We also looked at different approaches, criteria used, methods, techniques, input and output data, and so on. We think it's a useful overview of the methodologies and approaches to the policy evaluation. And this can facilitate more integrated approaches to specific environmental challenges. It is a knowledge sharing platform, and it can be used for various needs. It's a good starting point to explore how evaluation can be done, to look how others did it, to understand common elements, to learn from different approaches. So who is this for? We identified several groups. First, civil servants to be used as a benchmark. Our tool can be used to compare evaluations or to get inspired how others are doing it. Second, it can be used for researchers, by researchers. This tool has scientific data for meta-assessment. And thirdly, for evaluators, as a methodological toolbox, it informs which methods have been used in different contexts. That means learning from the past evaluations. And finally, it shows areas covered by policies, as lack of evaluation might indicate lack of policy action. So now I would like to give the floor to colleagues from Rumble, Aurélie and Fabian. They did an excellent job updating the catalog. They know everything about the methodology and will share main findings with you. Aurélie and Fabian, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Magdalena. I can maybe introduce first myself and Rumble. So Rumble is a global engineering consultancy. We provide services across different domains, building, transport, water, environment, architecture, landscape, and urbanism, and energy and management consulting. So I'm Aurélie, I'm a senior consultant within the Brussels team of Rainbow Management Consulting, together with Fabian. We work for the European institution, and we do a lot of policy evaluations. We are professional evaluators, so to say. So we are very happy to share our experience in updating the catalog with you all today. I'll leave Fabian introduce you to the methodology that will follow to update this interesting document and database. So, Fabian.
Thanks. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'll have the pleasure of running you through the methodology that we use to create or update the catalog, but also to create the catalog. And then I will share some of the key findings of the meta-analysis that we did on the information that we collected in the catalog. So next slide, please. So the first step, of course, was to define a scope of the catalog. So the scope was defined by a thematic and a geographic dimension. So first, obviously, the thematic scope was set on climate and or environmental policies. So we wanted to find evaluation that evaluate climate and or environmental policies. On the geographic scope, it focused, first of all, on policies on the European level. So policies that have been evaluated that cover the whole of Europe or the region that the EEA covers. And then further, we wanted to also have a set of national level evaluations. The main reason for that was that we wanted to have a comparison between national level evaluations and European level evaluations. But then we soon realized that it won't be possible to cover all the countries in Europe. So we decided to focus on a few European countries. And I realized there's a typo in the slides. Apologies for that. 7 European countries that we selected for the focus of the catalog. And these countries were selected based on best practice evaluators. So we wanted to look at the countries that we identified being the most active players in the field of evaluating environmental and climate policies. Next slide, please. So then the next step was, of course, finding the needles in the haystack, which we first did on the European level. We identified the relevant stakeholders and screened their websites on publications of policy evaluations in the respective fields. Same thing we did for the stakeholders on the national level. So we identified stakeholders. These were mainly the environmental ministries, environmental agencies of the countries, but also other types of ministries, ministries for economic affairs, financial affairs, or auditing bodies, for example. And then at last, we complemented this search for stakeholders by a keyword search, both in English and in the respective national languages. And then to the next slide. And finally, we created a huge list of possible evaluations that could be covered by or included in the catalog, but we needed from that original list to make a targeted selection where we found where we had specific selection criteria for. So first, the document had to have a policy and evaluative element. It needed to cover the geographic scope that we defined earlier. It needed to cover the thematic scope of the themes that we defined earlier, and of course the document had to be publicly available. So that was basically the methodology, how we came up with the list of policy evaluations. And then we gathered all this information that the catalog contains, and I will now run you through some of the main findings of the analysis that we did of this collected information. So on to the next slide. So at first, what you can see that the coverage of the policy evaluations is roughly split in half. So a bit less than half of the policy evaluations came from national level policies and 45% from policies on the EU level. We did have some policies or evaluations that maybe did not cover the geographic scope 100%. For example, there are some evaluations that cover a certain list of countries, so not the whole European level, or from the OECD level, we included some policy evaluations. And then on the next slide, we can look at the distribution of policy evaluations between the selected countries, which is already quite interesting, because first of all, it's apparent that the United Kingdom had the most policy evaluations in the catalogue, followed by the other two large countries that were included in the list, France and Germany, and Belgium being the least, having the least policy evaluations. A few reasons that we found for this distribution. One reason we found is that the federal government systems might influence, just because the regions in, for example, federal state of Germany or Belgium also have a lot of competences in formulating environmental policies, but we didn't include regional stakeholders in our search for evaluations. So this might explain why, for example, Belgium has very few evaluations in our catalog. A further reason was just simply the availability and accessibility of policy evaluations. For example, in France and the UK, we found very good databases on the national level that collect policy evaluations or studies. So it was just very easy for us to identify the evaluations in these countries, where, for example, in Belgium, it was more difficult to locate the evaluations. Then on the next slide, we can see the distribution of the time of publication of the policy evaluations. And what is very apparent is there's a growing trend in policy evaluations. So it seems to be that policy evaluations grow in numbers over the past decades in the field of environmental climate policies. But also in general, we have a few factors that might have influenced that. For example, a big influence that we will see in some other factors is the better regulation guidelines of the European Commission. So this is a guidelines of the Commission to systematically evaluate the European policies, but just influences the number of policies that have been published over the past years. Other factors are just digitalization in general, which makes it more easy for us to identify policies from recent years rather than, let's say, from the 1990s, where evaluations might have been conducted but just not been published digitally online. On the next slide, we can see the distribution of policy areas in which the evaluations have been conducted, and it reflects what Magdalena said earlier, that the great majority of evaluations are being conducted in the field of climate mitigation policies, energy policies, and policies governing renewable energy. But in general, if you see on the bottom, the other policy areas, which include a number of variety of evaluations, show that there is a great diversity of policy areas that are being covered by the catalogue and also in Europe in general. Then on the next slide, this shows the sectors that are being covered by the evaluation. So this means that we assigned a sector to a policy evaluation if the policy was related to the sector, or if evaluation assessed the impact of the policy in that economic sector. So in energy policy, it would be if an evaluation assessed the effect of a policy on the energy sector. And it reflects what I said earlier, that most policy evaluations are in the field of climate mitigation, energy policy. So it's not surprising that energy, industry, and buildings are the sectors with the largest coverage. Then we also, on the next slide, we looked at what kind of methods are being used in the policy evaluations. And this is a very interesting endeavor. It was also not very easy to always identify the methods. But basically, the great majority of evaluations use both qualitative and quantitative methods. So there's very few evaluations that only rely on one of these methodologies. And then also, if you look at the individual types of methods, you can see that literature review is the most popular method, easily just because it's the easiest one to conduct. While, for example, cost-benefit analysis or other complex quantitative methods are much more rare, just because the data is scarce in this field, and also it's much more complex to conduct these quantitative methods. And then on the next slide, we also looked in general on the evaluation techniques. So whether they focus on the impact of a policy, whether they focus on the process. So this means, in our definition, a process evaluation refers to an evaluation that looked at the state of play, or what kind of measures have been implemented by the policy. Yeah, it reflects what I said earlier, that impact assessments are the most prominent techniques used in policy evaluations. On the next slide, we also looked at the types of evaluations, so whether they look in the future, so if they assess prospectively the impact of a policy that is just being decided on, or whether they look backwards on the impacts in the past of a policy. And one interesting insight that we found here is that we also looked at whether the results of the policy were mainly positive or negative. So if the evaluators came to the conclusion that the overall policy has worked or has been well, and this actually correlated with the type of evaluation. So for example, among the ex post evaluations, they tended to be more positive than ex ante or midterm evaluations. So it seems to indicate maybe a slight bias either by the commissioners of the evaluations or by the evaluators themselves, that if you look backwards, you seem to be more forgiving, so to say, or more positive, while if you look into the future, the evaluations were much more critical. So yeah, this was the main key findings that we gathered from the analysis of the policy evaluations, and Roland will now share some best practice examples and trends that we identified. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Fabian. Conscious of the time, I will just take 2 minutes to give an overview of some conclusions or findings we found very interesting while updating the catalogs. Regarding the different topics, we clearly saw that those hot political topics are driving the trends in the evaluation world. And you see that health, socioeconomic development are kind of drivers for environmental policies. So you can see that just transition or the connection between environment and public health are concerns that are included in many policy evaluations. about just transition, we also think and see that we can expect that high energy intensive economies and territories are likely to have more and more policy evaluation going on in the field of environment and energy. On that topic of the territorial geographic coverage of the catalogue and the topics covered, it's interesting to see that there is a majority of evaluations covering energy, climate issues, and it seems that less evaluation in the field of water policies or waste management policies. But in the end, this also highlights that as the scope of the catalogue is focused on national evaluation, you see that a lot of environmental policies are really in the hand of local and regional authorities. For example, evaluation in the field of water, you will find them at the scale of water basin level. So this is also interesting to see that if we focus on national or European level, maybe we can have an unbalanced representation of the different topics, but that also reflects how the policies are, to what extent they are centralized or decentralized. We also see that some new industries are under the radar, and the digitalization policies, ICT, the ICT sector is more and more a subject of policy evaluation. And yeah, finally, regarding the methods, being an evaluator since 2004, something like this, I can see that there is an increase in quantitative methods, and cost-benefit analysis or econometrics are used more and more to ensure complex quantification of effects or costs of the different policies. So that's from a more qualitative point of view, a more expert point of view. It may be a bit subjective, but yeah, that was some very interesting findings we got to during this assignment with Magdalena. And now, Magdalena, I think we can go to the next slides and have the demo, because you can find the whole report on our website, the Ramble website. We published for the EEA the report, but now Magdalena will show you the tool.
Thank you both for a great overview. So now I would like to show you the catalog itself. I will take just a few minutes. I hope you can see the catalog, see my screen still. I made the cursor bigger so you can see what I'm pointing at. So at the top of the page is the short introduction. You can also find the link to the report, to the background report. At the bottom of the page, we have a summary of a methodology behind the catalog. And the catalog itself is here. As you see, we have almost 596 policy evaluations. And this is the database that is searchable. So here is the list of different filters where you can search for the information. So for example, if you are interested in an energy efficiency area, but at the same time you are interested in another area, here you can change between match all, match any, and then you can select several elements. If you would want, for example, check the information on the effectiveness of the catalog will then find this information, 98 policies. You can download the results here now you will download only this what was selected. It's download in CSV that you can open in an Excel. This is how the information look like. All the columns are here. You can, the last thing I would like to show you, reset the filters here. You can also use here the search them. For example, you would like to use for information on the biodiversity, and then the catalog will search for the information in every field whenever the word biodiversity is used. So here it's highlighted, but then also for some other when it's not necessarily the title or the directly used here, you can find it somewhere else. Here, of course, you have the links, and you can go to the policy evaluation itself. I think that was the short demo I wanted to show. Let me go back to the presentation. I would like now to share some of the reflections about the next steps. And do we want to keep the catalog alive? That's the main question. So the short answer, we don't know yet. We don't know exactly. We did some reflection, but of course, we would like to keep the catalog alive and up to date, but only if there is an interest. And we were just having some questions around that. So the first, we are aware more and more evaluations are becoming available, but the question here is do we need all of the evaluation? Are they all relevant? Should we keep the broad scope, environment, sustainability, the systemic approach, or should we rather narrow the area, focus maybe only on energy or only on other new areas? If we decide to update the catalog, how often should we do it? What is realistic? Should we do it every 5 years? Should we do it every year? What would work the best? And if we update it, is it only the EEA responsibility? Maybe we could have some kind of co-creation project. We could, for example, involve different networks, different communities. Maybe we could tap into the stakeholder knowledge. We could create an open repository, a website, some kind of simple web form that the user could inform us about the publications. We can allow anyone to add a policy evaluation, but then we could have a team reviewing it. So this was our thinking around. We don't have answers to that, but we would like to use this opportunity to ask you for your feedback. We will have the 4-question poll, very short poll, but now, for the sake of finishing the recording, I would like first to show you some extra where you can find some extra information of what was presented here. Here are some links to our products. And I would like to thank you for the participation and the interest in the catalog. Here are our email addresses. If you would like to share your feedback, some information, you would like to get in touch, please write to us. So I believe this is now the moment when we could stop recording, and now we could have a few minutes to look at the poll to get